Hey team, we're going to be doing some more regular vlogs here at HPA to give you a bit of an idea on what's going on behind the scenes and also talk about some of the projects that we've got on the go. In the first of these vlogs, we're going to start by talking about our FD RX7 Project car here. Brandon's been furiously working away while we've been coming out of lockdown, trying to get the last few bits and pieces finished up. Now, before I can really give you a good rundown on this car, we probably need to start at the start, which is with our red RX7. So let's pop out and we'll have a quick look at that. So this guy here came up a little while ago. It was a decent price, and while I'm not really a rotary guy at heart, I have always had a soft spot for the FD RX7, and this seemed like a pretty good opportunity to get one at a fair price. It obviously needed a bit of work, and someone had done a really shoddy single turbo upgrade, probably actually a downgrade in the end. It wasn't running, it was missing a whole bunch of parts, so we bought the car from the North Island sight unseen. And when we got it here, it was a pretty good example of an FD RX7, but it also was pretty clear that to get it to the kind of level that we wanted it to be, it was going to take a lot of work and a lot of money. And we're pretty OCD here at HPA, so we really wanted it to be perfect condition when we're finished. So while we were looking at what our options were with that, Zach, who used to work here at the time, our wiring guy, offered us his RX7, which is the white one. Let's head back in and we'll check it out in a bit more detail. So Zach, just like us, is pretty OCD. Had this car as his daily driver for a fair while. It was actually damaged slightly in the Christchurch earthquakes. Not really too sure exactly what happened, but I think some things ended up falling on it. So under insurance, he ended up getting the whole car panelled and repainted. Really tidy, so it hasn't actually really seen the light of day since a full panel and paint. It is immaculate, so pretty much ticked all of our boxes. At the time, he was doing a bit of an upgrade on the factory twin turbos, and the car wasn't running, pretty much like most rotaries. So it was a good opportunity for us. The engine in it was standard. It was a known good running engine, and again, with rotary engines, that's pretty hard to come by. So we made a deal with Zach and we took ownership of this car. In particular, as I've said, the outside is mint, but if we jump onto the inside as well, other than the fact that at the moment we've got a few bits apart, also pretty tidy, everything's in really good condition. And what we sort of plan to do with this car is keep it as a tidy street car, albeit modified with some key components. So we'll talk about what we're doing there. So we're sort of coming into this vlog a fair way through the build of the car, and I just want to kind of get you up to speed. So motor is staying standard for the time being, and what we're doing is trying to optimize the airflow in and out of the engine. So one of the key parts with this was a Turblown turbo kit. So that includes a stainless steel investment cast exhaust manifold. This is quite key because the reliability of the exhaust manifold, particularly in a rotary application where there's a lot of heat, can be a bit of a problem. We see a lot of fabricated manifolds tend to crack. Also, because of the design or size of the exhaust ports versus the inlet to the turbocharger turbine housing, there's a bit of a taper going on in there. Again, that's a little tricky to get in fabricated manifolds, not impossible, but it does make it a little bit more difficult. With the investment cast manifold, really easy to incorporate it. So we'll have a quick look. We're in the process of kind of getting it all back together, but we've got the manifold down there. So that's all bolted up to the block for the final time. So it's got its heat shielding around it, which is another nice aspect of the Turblown kit. The heat shield's a in-canal shielding that's moulded, as you can see, nice fitment there. Also got a couple of ports on the runners, so we're running exhaust manifold back pressure on each runner as well as exhaust gas temperature. Over the back we can see that we've got our two Turbo Smart wastegates. Now they're going to also be running sensor caps, so we've got wastegate position, and then down there on the chassis rail we've got mounted our two exhaust manifold back pressure sensors with the damper canisters. Now one of the things with the exhaust manifold design. It's a little bit hard to really see in too much detail here, but the way the wastegates are integrated off the exhaust manifold is key, and the flow into the wastegates is nice and smooth. The exhaust gas doesn't need to go through any crazy angles, and that means that we should have really, really good stable boost control. Again, that's something that we can have problems with if the integration of the wastegate isn't sort of ideal. So a lot of time's been put into that. It also gets pretty tight in the packaging there. With the Turblown kit, it actually is delivered with some wastegate dump pipes that dump to atmosphere. That'd be fine if we were building this as a race car where that would be legal, but here in New Zealand for road use we can't dump our wastegates to atmosphere. So we teamed up with the guys from Vinny Fab, and they did a lot of fabrication work on it, in particular a V-mount intercooler and radiator setup, which at the moment isn't in there. We'll talk about that once that's remounted. They also did a really exquisite exhaust manifold, and a lot of work went into the wastegate integration. I'll get it up on the hoist and we'll have a quick look at that. Right, with the car up on the hoist, let's have a look underneath and we'll have a look at the exhaust system that Vinny Fab built. And particularly, again, you can see how tight it is for the wastegates and the dump pipes. Normally this front wastegate here, the dump pipe that came with the Turblown kit just came straight down here, basically dumping between the subframe and the lower control arm. And there wasn't enough room to actually route that down underneath the other wastegate. So Vinny Fab actually managed to go up and over, avoiding obviously the steering rack as well. This being a right-hand drive car, our room is even worse than left-hand drive cars in the US. So that all integrates and comes down here. We've got a couple of little stainless steel bellows to allow a bit of movement and expansion. Everything's V-band mounted, so nice and easy to install and remove. And we've actually gone to the trouble of running the wastegate separately all the way to the rear of the car. Now I know a few of you will be thinking, well, really, is that actually necessary? Is it overkill? And the problem is that we do need to run the wastegates all the way to the back of the car to be legal here in New Zealand. So that's the first consideration. Obviously, the other option we've got is just to reintegrate the wastegates back into the main exhaust. And there are two schools of thought on this. Basically, particularly with a turbocharged engine, the lower the exhaust back pressure we can get, the better the performance. And by keeping these separate, the main exhaust doesn't actually have to support the flow from the two wastegates. So it's kind of similar in a way to ending up with a larger exhaust. We're not going to be doing some back-to-back testing on this. Everyone might have their own opinion on whether or not that's necessary, but at the end of the day, this is the way we've gone. With the car back down on the ground, we'll look at a few of the other details here. So again, stock engine, but we're expecting we should be able to make a fairly reliable 400 wheel horsepower. And at some point in time, we probably will end up building an engine for it where we can really see the true potential of the turbo that's going on it. Now, talking about the turbo, let's have a quick look at that. Obviously, it's not on at the moment, but we can still show you what we've got going on there. So this is a Borg-Warner 8474 turbocharger. Now, frustratingly, when we actually got this turbo kit from Turblown, this was the first 8474 in New Zealand. We were hoping to be able to do some testing pretty early on with the 8474, and that just hasn't really panned out. Things got away on us, as a lot of projects normally do, and everything just takes longer than you'd expect. With a compressor cover, Vinny Fab, while they had the car, made some modifications. So we've got the outlet modified here, quite tight, so it's easier to weld a 90-degree bend onto it. And instead of using silicon joiners, which is typical, we've chosen to go with a plasma clamp system. So got a couple of the clamps here. Basically, they are a clamshell design, similar to the Wiggins clamps, which have been around motorsport for years. Still allows a little bit of angular misalignment and a little bit of movement, but the advantage with the plasma clamp is that once they're done up, there's no way that a hose is going to blow off. So we've got those on the compressor inlet as well. We've also upgraded the factory Borg-Warner EFR blow-off valve to a Turbo Smart compact design, and we've also fitted the Turbo speed sensor. Here at HPA we're kind of data nerds, so when it comes to data, the more the better. So that turbocharger definitely isn't going to be performing at its maximum with the stock engine, but again, we're future-proofing this. And given the way the rotary engines work, we're still expecting with that 8474 that we're going to have a pretty low boost threshold, so it should still be nice and drivable, again, because we are building this as a street car. Now, getting the air into the engine is only one aspect of it. Obviously, we also need to provide an upgrade in the fueling, and this is where CJ Motorsports come in. So we've got a CJ Motorsports fuel rail kit there. Those are coupled with a set of Injector Dynamics 1300 primaries and a set of Injector Dynamics 1700 secondaries. We're going to be running this primarily on pump gas, but we also will be tuning it for flex fuel capabilities. So we've got an ethanol content sensor that is mounted down here on the firewall. In terms of the rest of the fuel system, we have also upgraded the fuel pump, and again we've used a CJ Motorsports drop-in pump kit. So that's a CNC machined billet pump hanger. It has the ability to take 2 pumps. At the moment we don't need that, so we're only going to be running 1, but again gives us some future proofing if we need to upgrade the fuel system in the future. The last part of the puzzle we'll talk about here is the ECU, and we are going to be running this car hopefully on multiple ECUs. It's going to be a bit of a test bench for ECUs for developing course content as well as webinars. So like we did with our 350Z, we're going to have the ability to reasonably easily change between different ECUs with adapter harnesses. However, we are starting with the Adaptronic modular ECU, and we're really excited to test that ECU out. I've heard good things about it from others, particularly in the rotary scene. Turblown in particular, Elliot there is a big fan of the Adaptronic ECU, and also known Andy Wyatt, the owner of Adaptronic for a few years, and I really class him as one of the smartest cookies out there in the aftermarket ECU game, so pretty keen to get that up and running and test it out on the dyno. One other thing we have done with the engine as well was the clutch, and the factory clutch wasn't going to be up to the task of 400 wheel horsepower, so we've gone with an ORC twin plate clutch. And this can get a little bit tricky, choosing a clutch that is going to handle the power, but particularly for a road car still be drivable. And particularly when I ran my old workshop and we're tuning cars daily, I see a lot of cars come through the shop that were modified street cars, and someone would go with a solid center twin plate clutch that held the power perfectly but was completely undrivable on the street. So we really wanted something that was going to do the job but still remain drivable. Again, have heard really good things about the ORC clutch, so ultimately we'll have to wait and see once we've got up and running to see how well the clutch does work for us. So hopefully that's kind of brought you up to speed with where the build is at the moment. Obviously we are working on this every week, so there's a lot of progress to talk about. What we're going to do now is have a quick look at some of the development we've just done around adapting the current throttle body to drive-by-wire. Thought I'd give you a quick update on our FD RX7 Project car. This has been underway for way too long, just like pretty much every project ever. And we're getting kind of to the point where it's pretty much waiting on wiring and a bit of plumbing, so that's what Brandon's been doing. Just having a quick look through here. Actually, it's missing the turbo at the moment. We've got a Turblown turbo kit, which includes a Borg-Warner EFR 8474. But you can see here is some of the stuff that comes with the Turblown kit is really nice. In particular, this molded heat shielding that goes around it. Rotaries, renowned for producing a huge amount of heat. You can also see in here, Brandon's been making up the lines for our exhaust manifold back pressure sensors. They're mounted just down there, and there's also going to be twin EGT sensors in there. However, what I really wanted to talk about was the throttle body. So the stock Mazda throttle body is a bit of a weird one. Basically uses 3 butterflies. There's a primary and secondary arrangement. And while there's nothing necessarily wrong with cable throttle body, we wanted to switch to drive-by-wire. And I know probably a few of you are thinking, well, why would we do that? Drive-by-wire is laggy, it's horrible. Well, it's 2020, let's get with the times. Modern drive-by-wire throttle is not laggy. The lag is kind of a myth when you're using a modern drive-by-wire throttle body, and particularly coupled with a modern ECU. A lot of that mush and lag from factory cars actually comes in the way they're set up and tuned. So we're not worried about that. There's some huge advantages. If you're still a doubter, don't worry. We're actually going to do a video all about this at some point in the future, and we'll dispel those myths. For now, just accept the fact we're going drive-by-wire. Now, the problem with this particular setup is converting to drive-by-wire and retaining the 3 butterflies is pretty difficult. There are kits on the market that let you mount up a LS drive-by-wire throttle body with an adapter bracket or adapter plate, but again, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to retain those 3 butterflies. So what we thought of is using a remote mounted drive-by-wire motor like this. Now this one's actually off a BMW S54 engine. It mounts down on the side of the block, and then you can use a push rod to actuate the throttle body. So that's nice, and we've had this hanging around the workshop for a while. Problem is finding an easy way of mounting it, and what we had initially thought of doing was mounting it down underneath the upper inlet manifold. I'm kind of OCD, so I wanted it out of the way so it wasn't really visible, but in the end, as you can see, we put our IGM-1A coils down there, so not a lot of room. However, because we ended up having to remove the air conditioning from this engine, it just wasn't really practical to keep the aircon with the V-mount, front mount intercooler kit. This gave us the opportunity to actually use that aircon bracket to mount the drive-by-wire motor. So if we get back down in here, a little bit hard to see, but the aircon bracket is just down here on the side of the engine, and conveniently that actually gives us a nice straight shot straight up to the throttle bell crank. So let's head upstairs and we'll have a look at the solution that we've come up with. So what Brandon did was he took the drive-by-wire motor and he basically did a real simple model in Fusion 360, and he also designed this bracket in Fusion 360 that adapts to the air conditioning bracket and then mounts the drive-by-wire throttle. And then using the wonders of modern technology, if we go over here, that's our little bracket. It's about 97% finished. Now this is only a prototype. Obviously we aren't going to be mounting our drive-by-wire throttle using a piece of plastic, but this just allows us to test fit everything, make sure it's all going to work how we expect, and once we're comfortable with that, then we can send that off and have it CNC machined out of alloy. So hopefully it's going to be a nice simple solution to convert to drive-by-wire throttle.
One eternity later.
So here's our finished product. This is what our 3D printer just spat out, and it's time for Brandon to actually test fit it, see if all his measurements worked out. Let's check it out.
Oh, it is. So you got it blasted, was it?
Yeah, I don't know what he's probably got it blasted. Does it fit? Moment of truth.
I need to drill that one out. That was the part. Hold on. Because I printed this piece in that hole.
What did you do? Oh, why'd you do that? That little guy there, that's the problem. You can fix that though. Oh, it's looking promising. Where is it? Down there. There you go.
Looks perfect to me.
It's perfect. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, you can ask them in the comments. We're going to be releasing our vlogs regularly, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any future updates.